do you mean you believe these are things that happened?
That's a strange
I know you don't
thing.
like that. Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
If I went back in time with a video camera, would the little LCD screen show a man walk out of that tomb?
Jordan Peterson has frustrated atheists and Christians alike with his unwillingness to answer yes or no to questions like, do you believe in God, or did Jesus Christ rise again from the dead? But Alex O'Connor does a really good job of nailing him down, sort of anyway. Welcome to One Life Network, everyone. I'm Brett, and I've been a pastor for a long time, and at One Life, we are passionate about exploring cultural conversations from a Christ-centered worldview with people who believe and those who don't believe. And if that sounds like something you'd like to be a part of, join our community by subscribing and hitting the like button. This segment is taken from an over 2-hour conversation between Jordan Peterson and Alex O'Connor, where O'Connor says he was just trying to make sure he really understands what Peterson believes. The highlight is arguably his comments on the resurrection, and we're going to let it play out, and then I'll add some comments at the end and cheer on Alex O'Connor, of all things. Watch this.
A lot of Christians are frustrated when they begin asking about Jesus, who's a much more physical entity, right? It's a real human being. It's someone of flesh and blood. It's someone who's physically crucified by the Romans.
It's a very different question. It's a very different question.
And then is seen as a physical entity, at least according to the canonical tradition, by his disciples after he died.
Yeah.
So when somebody asks you, do you believe that that happened? And when I've seen you asked about that question, you tend to still speak in terms of the psychological and the mythological. I think the frustration is that, as you've just said, these are
I
two
don't
different
mind
conversations,
frustrating
right?
Christians in that regard either, because the truth of the matter is, with regard to the gospel accounts, that the mythological and the historical are inextricably cross-contaminated.
Sure.
There's no pulling out the historical Jesus, right? That's a non-starter. And why that is, I don't know. It's very mysterious. It's very hard to understand, as are the, let's say, the accounts of the resurrection. Okay, so what do I think about that? Well, I think that denying the historical reality of Christ I think that's just a fool's errand.
Of course.
I don't know why anybody would bother with it.
So a man exists called Jesus. We have that much.
Now, there's a claim that is attributed to Christ that he is the embodiment or the incarnation, the fulfillment, let's say, of the prophet and the laws.
Yes.
I think that's true. Yeah. What does that mean? Well, I think it's in the Gospel of John. I think Gospel of John closes with a statement that's something like, if all the books that were ever written were written about the gospel accounts, that wouldn't be enough books to explain what had happened.
Yeah, if all the things that Jesus did.
Yeah. And there's a truth in that. The truth is that profound religious account is bottomless. And the biblical representations are like that. There's no limit to the amount of investigation they can bear, not least because the text itself is deeply cross-referenced. So there's an innumerable number of paths through it. It's like a chessboard. And so it's inexhaustible in its interpretive space.
That's true.
And that's a problem too, because it means it's also susceptible to multiple interpretations, including potentially competing interpretations.
I think a lot of people interpret Paul, for example, the earliest New Testament source, as saying that if Jesus did not literally rise from the dead, if there was not a man who stopped breathing and then started breathing again, then your faith is futile and you're still in your sins. That is, Christianity is undermined. Now, that means that, and Paul doesn't say, sort of believing that that's false is really bad. He says, if you do not believe this proactively, then your faith is futile.
That's the problem I have with that.
If you
Really, really critical point there.
don't proactively believe that yourself, then I think when a Christian asks you, do you believe in the resurrection of Jesus? Are you a Christian? I think you must be committed to saying no, at least under that interpretation of Paul. And even if you're not sure, I mean, it's fine if I say to you, do you think that a man physically rose from the dead? And you say something like, well, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there, but I think it has a lot of mythological significance, or I think that maybe it happened in a different sense, or it happened in the sense that good fiction happens, then fine. But it needs to begin with that caveat of the simple sort of, historically speaking, I don't know. And I know you don't like to pull out the historical Jesus from the mythological,
that's a good objection.
But it's an important question to ask.
No, of course, it's a very good objection. So I just did a seminar on the Gospels with a crew of about 8 people. And it was the same crew that walked through Exodus with me with a couple of variations. And we spent a lot of time on the resurrection accounts, for example. And of course, that was the toughest, let's say, that was the toughest morsel to chew and digest. The thing about the resurrection accounts is that they're all, look, so I could say something like this, which will just annoy people, but it doesn't matter. I believe the accounts, but I have no idea what they mean.
When you say you believe the accounts, do you mean, and I hate to be sort of pedantic here, it seems pedantic, but do you mean you believe that these are things that happened such that
that's a strange
I know you
thing.
don't like that. Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
If I went back in time with a Panasonic video camera and put that camera in front of the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, would the little LCD screen show a man walk out of that tomb?
I would suspect yes.
So that to me seems like a belief in the historical event of the resurrection, or at least of Jesus leaving the tomb, which means that when somebody says, you know, do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead? It doesn't seem clear to me why you're not able to just say, it would seem to me yes.
Because I have no idea what that means. And neither did the people who saw it.
Hats off to Alex OConnor, for one thing. For what I found in some atheists is they don't really have a very good understanding of what they do not believe. And if they go against Christianity, they don't have a very good grip on what it actually is. And to O'Connor's credit, he knows what he's talking about when it comes to what he doesn't believe in that sense, because he pushes on the resurrection. He quotes Paul, who is the earliest source for the earliest Christian beliefs about the resurrection. And Paul does say very clearly, without the resurrection, he's talking about the physical, actual empty tomb resurrection, then your faith is futile. He does say that, and O'Connor's very aware of that, and pushing Peterson on this is a very important thing. And then he says, I believe that it happened, which is a heck of an admission, but I don't know what it means. And that's where Jordan Peterson, I would encourage him to go ahead and read further. And I'm sure he has, but maybe there's something blocking in the way he thinks. He's kind of a very complex thinker, if anything else, but I think he's a sincere person. But the earliest believers, at first, they didn't understand what it meant, but it didn't take them very long to become, according to the book of Acts, a very resurrection-centric movement. That's what they were. And they found out what it means, and they would proclaim things like, for one, the resurrection meant the affirmation of Jesus' identity. Jesus made all kinds of claims about himself, being the light of the world and the bread of life and all those kinds of things, and the resurrection was the affirmation on that. The resurrection signaled, according to Paul, with the age to come, which Jesus believed in, Paul believed in, all the early believers believed in. They believed there was an age to come where God was going to defeat death, and he was going to resurrect not only Jesus, but he was going to resurrect all of us who followed him, and Jesus was the first in the long line, and it gave us a piece of understanding into that new age. It showed us our future, in other words. It affirms, and they talk about this a little bit later in the conversation, it affirms the importance of the physical. It does matter that Jesus left an empty tomb. He wasn't just resurrected spiritually as we understand it. He was resurrected physically. It's very important to the stories, and that affirms the importance of God's good original design on the physical universe. That's critical. So all of those things put together, it provide us a ground of belief. In other words, the resurrection, and we've talked about this before, is the resurrection can be looked at as an historical event as much as a spiritual event. You can go back and you can wonder about the empty tomb. You can look at archaeological evidence and all of those kinds of things. So that can affirm a belief. So that's a number of things of what the resurrection means. So I think Jordan Peterson is on his way to a deeper belief, because I think he's going to discover what it means. So if you are interested in kind of building up your faith when it comes to looking at evidence like the resurrection in history, check out this video we've called The Worst Argument for Believing the Bible. If any of that helped out, hope to see you next time.